Hello, everyone. I want to take you through a brief explanation of our upcoming logic model assignment, just so that you can hear my words and voice overlay our assignment description. So, I first tip and item of feedback that I want to give you for this assignment is that logic models and the logic model assignment is not very verbose. This is quite a short assignment. It is only 4 pages long, and one page of that is your actual figure or logic model template. And so a lot of the work that has to do with our logic model is not in writing and doing research, but a lot of it has to do with the conceptualization of the program that you want to implement within your organization or population of focus, and then really going through the steps in terms of how you're going to create change and how that change through the program and how that change is going to increase aspects of positive things in your population and decrease maybe negative impacts that are impacting your population of focus. So I want you to think back on your needs assessment. So the final step of your needs assessment is that you are going to bring together all of the information, all the data that you collected from your population of focus, and then create an identified program or service that you would like to implement. And then with the work of the logic models, you're going to show us how you are going to implement that program and how it's then going to lead to change. So that is the logic model. So the program or service may be broadly defined. So ideally, the program would be a new element or offering in the larger community-based organization identified in the needs assessment. However, it could also be a new community-based organization meeting a new and distinct need amongst your recipient population and community. So please check with me if you are unclear about what this is. One of the things I would recommend is if you have an idea for a program, to really do some research in the literature on the internet and see if there is already a program like this program out there in the world that's already been created, and really examining and taking a look at the elements of that program. So for example, I one time had a student do a logic model and a program evaluation on social and emotional learning, so SEL education amongst elementary school students. So she went out in the literature and looked at evidence-based practice for SEL education. And then she looked at the elements of those and broke down those elements in her logic model. So for example, what does it take to train educational staff to implement SEL education? How many modules does it take? Are there existing onboarding manuals? What are the expected outcomes related to SEL education? How do we increase social emotional learning and maybe decrease things like depression amongst our students that we're implementing? So that's just one example. There's many different evidence-based practice out there, but really make sure that you are not trying to reinvent the wheel. If there is already an evidence-based practice out there, just use the elements of those evidence-based practice is for your logic model. Okay, so what are the elements of this paper? First, we want you to provide an introduction. So we want one citation from the Royce textbook that we've been using all semester, and also use an additional citation from the literature. So you're going to use that literature to construct a description of a logic model. In what ways do logic models inform social work practice, and how are they best used in program evaluation? And what are the key limitations of using logic models in social work? Second, describe the program or service for which the logic model will be created. So again, go back to the very last part of your needs assessment, and you can kind of repeat some of that to re-explain the program that you plan to be implementing or the service. What are the primary programmatic elements? So does this involve training or onboarding new staff? Does it involve a parent training program? Does it involve the creation of a food pantry? What is it, and what are the elements that we need to implement it? In what ways will the program meet the identified needs that you determined in a needs assessment? And what goals is the program trying to achieve? Is it permissible to use the same program description from the previous assignment? Yes, it is. Remember, there is no such thing as self-plagiarism in this class, so please use the elements from the needs assessment that will help you answer this question. Third is really your visualization. So this is where I want you to create a figure, and I'm going to show you an example in one minute. But we want you to develop a logic model containing the following elements. So inputs, activities, output, and intermediate outcomes. So that you can also add in final or long-term outcomes. I've also had students do short, middle, and long-term outcomes. So please provide both a logic model template and then a narrative explaining the different components. So you're welcome to use or create any logic template that at minimum includes inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes. Each component should be its own kind of column, or at least be separated in the logic model so I can determine what they are. And then we want a narrative that provides more detailed description of the information. And we want you to explain why you chose activities and how they lead to outcomes, i.e. your theory of change. Please explain why you chose your inputs as it relates to best practice and empirical evidence. Citational evidence is appropriate here as well if you're using, let's say, an evidence-based practice that's already in the world. So ensure that you have identified inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and final outcomes. So one of the things I want to just kind of nail down is this idea of outputs. Many of you in my feedback for this week were maybe a little bit confused about what list and define service units are for each service to be provided. What I want you to think about is service units being, what are you implementing? So is this, let's say, a training for employees? Are you developing modules? Are you developing, let's say, an onboarding manual? You want to think about these as like service units that you are going to implement as a part of the programmatic activities. But then you also want to think about this as, what are you leaving behind? So let's say you are an outside party implementing the program and then evaluating the program. You want to think about what is going to be left behind at the organization after you leave. So the example I give that we have been working on with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians on an evaluation team I'm looking at is that we're leaving behind the onboarding manual for new employees, but we've also designed and developed several training models, a handbook for shadowing, a manual that involves policies and procedures and new employees need to know. So you want to think about some things that are physical that you're leaving behind. And lastly, outcomes, short-term and long-term. Short-term outcomes are things that you want to really change in the next, let's say, couple of months, couple of years. So these could be more immediate outcomes. Long-term outcomes, you want to think about, well, if we have, let's say, a community with less substance use amongst youth, then what kind of community impact will that have? Will there be more safety in the community? Will there be better health and well-being amongst youth? Will this maybe upstart new youth serving programs? Will we have less incarceration of youth? Think about these as like broader community impacts. And lastly, what concluding thoughts do you have about logic modeling and the impact on program, agency, and community well-being served? So include that brief description on how you think the logic model will be used for your forthcoming program evaluation assignment. So this is really the link in the bridge to the final project of this course. So again, maximum length is 4 pages. One of those pages is your logic model template. So this is really a very brief 3-page paper. So just to give you an example or a visualization, this is one way you could display your logic model. So kind of outlaying the problem of what you found in your needs assessment. Inputs. So what are you going to need to input programmatically to create change? Outputs, what activities are you going to implement and what kind of participation do you need, let's say amongst clients, amongst program staff? outcomes, short-term, midterm, long-term, short-term, how is this going to change your population of focus, long-term, how is this going to change the community, and then you can give or take this final report, but this might be kind of a preview of what you maybe want to do for your program evaluation, but the green part is not necessary. All right, everybody, reach out to me if you want me to take a look at your logic models, if you have any questions for your upcoming assignments, and I hope you all have a great night. Take care. Bye.